Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. I got this email from Dennis Long, Elder Holland's breadcrumb comment at St. George Temple. This caught my attention. I've noticed that President Holland, he likes to leave breadcrumbs. We've covered some before on the channel. I'm going to remind you of one in just a minute here. And so I wanted to check this out, and I'm really glad that I did because it led me to a place I didn't expect. And it paints a really exciting picture for the future, hopefully the near future, about church growth. And oh my gosh, it's just amazing. So before we get into this, let me give you the update on the Flood the Earth Challenge. We are now at 7,405 copies of the Book of Mormon that have been shared. So we're getting really close to the next milestone, which is 7,500. I do a little color right here whenever we reach the next 500. So we're ultimately trying to get to 10,000. And, well, we're almost a quarter of the way there. So that's really good. And then, excitingly, there was a report of somebody meeting with the missionaries, which brings our total to 99. And it's our first one for this month. Oops, I got to update that. It's our first one for this month. Now, this month isn't really going as well as other months, but that's my fault because, as I've said before, I basically have to make sure to bring this challenge up in every video possible to keep it on everybody's minds. And then after that, I have to go through and update everybody's reports. And that's a little bit monotonous, but it's well worth it because it motivates people. And we find people that want to know more about the church, and some of them actually join. So let's keep it up, everybody. If you haven't joined already, please consider doing so. It helps motivate others. And you never know when somebody is ready to receive the Book of Mormon, and if they're, if they've already been prepared for that point to receive it, maybe they're ready to find the gospel and join the church. So just do it. Use the Spirit, pray, but just don't hold back. Do it. You give copies of the Book of Mormon. Okay, so that's where we're at with that. So, yeah, the rededication of the St. George Temple, that's my most recent item on my Second Coming timeline. You can see it right here. It happened on Sunday, December 10th. The last temple that was dedicated for the first time was the Okinawa, Japan temple on the 12th of November. And then we had this rededication of the St. George, Utah temple. And then the next temple that's going to be dedicated, well, actually there's two in January, the Lima, Peru, Los Olivos temple and Orem, Utah temple. I have to check and see if there's any updates, if any new dedications have been scheduled, but this is probably accurate right here. So anyway, so exciting things. And yeah, it was President Holland that rededicated it. So let's go back to the email from Dennis Long. Jared, on YouTube, I saw a clip from KSL News in Salt Lake City, Utah, regarding President Holland's rededication of the St. George Temple where he grew up. His recovery from near death was truly a miracle. If you don't know what that's referring to, if you missed that video or didn't see it in the news, there was like a newsroom article where Elder Renlund said that based on his experience, meeting with so many sick people during his ministry, looking at Elder Holland at the time, it didn't look like he was going to make it. And just one day he suddenly was doing a lot better, had basically done a 180. And Elder Renlund said that he's here by a miracle, that the Lord wants him here for some purpose. And I believe that. So anyway, so he lived to rededicate the St. George Temple at the very least, and I'm sure he'll do more. All right, continuing with the email, listen to his comments regarding the role of the Utah Pioneer Temples at the end of the clip. He says they're renovated to handle a very large number of people who will be taking their endowments out, and by doing so will change history. So I'm going to show you the actual quote in just a minute here, and some other quotes that go along with it that you have maybe probably heard but have forgotten. And this is exciting when you put it all together. Continuing with the email, this sounds very millennial to me. St. George is not a huge metropolis, and there are so many other Utah temples to handle all the reservations the local saints can book. I can't imagine a huge number of current saints lining up outside. But after the second coming, we might see millions to billions of more converts immediately anxious to get their temple endowments, and this would literally change history. To me, sounds like Elder Holland was leaving a breadcrumb for the alert viewer to hear and pick up on. Aloha, Dennis Long. Well, thank you, Dennis, because I'm so glad that you brought this up. And before I get into the quote and the other quotes I'm going to share, and then the numbers, I have some pretty interesting numbers to share with you. I've created a new spreadsheet. We're going to look at the implications of what's going on with temples right now and how many are being built. So let me just give you a quick example, though, of President Holland leaving a breadcrumb. I've brought this up before. Okay, this is an article from October 2019. Elder Holland gives an inside look to miracles that made the BYU Jerusalem Center possible. Now, I'm a proponent of the idea that the BYU Jerusalem Center has been built to be a temple. And let me go through it. Let me go through all the, the disclaimers here. I know that it's not on the Temple Mount. I know that the church has an agreement not to proselyte, not to use the building for proselyting. That's the only thing. I've looked it up. I've searched high and low. The only agreement that the church has is to not proselyte and use the BYU Jerusalem Center for that purpose. That does not mean that it cannot be repurposed. Additionally, I wouldn't be surprised if there is a temple built on the Temple Mount, but I also keep in mind the plan for New Jerusalem. When Joseph Smith was planning it the first time, there was going to be a 24 temple complex, and here it is right here on the Joseph Smith papers. If you go to the back side, it has all the names of the temples and what they're supposed to be used for. They all have different purposes. They're not temples like what we have right now. Maybe one or two, or some of them would be. But basically, they're in groups of 3, and they're for the different offices of the priesthood, including deacons and elders, apostles, and so on. I have a spreadsheet where I basically transcribed all this and made a visual. But basically, what I'm trying to get at is, and here's the revised plan where they kind of reoriented the temples. The point that I'm trying to get to is, if New Jerusalem is going to have multiple temples, then why wouldn't Old Jerusalem have multiple temples? Okay, so proselyting is the only thing, and we're not using it to proselyte. The Lord can do whatever he wants because he's God, so he can do whatever he wants. And prophecy usually plays out in natural ways. I think that if the Jews built a temple on the Temple Mount, it would alert a lot of people, especially in the church. And I don't think that the Lord typically works that way. There's people that are asleep, people that have their own interpretations, they lean to their own understanding. And this would be a perfect way for, oh, guess what? It's the second coming. Are you ready? So I don't see any problem with this becoming a temple and this fulfilling at least the requirement for a temple in Jerusalem. And maybe it's just a first temple of several. So let me just read a few things here, share this breadcrumb with you, and then we'll continue on with the St. George rededication and the quotes about church growth and numbers that I guess the church is expecting. That's like the whole point of this video. Ultimately, that's like the climax of this video, is what I think is the number of members that the church is expecting in the near future, and it's going to blow you away. Okay, so this is what Jeffrey R. Holland said in regards to the BYU Jerusalem Center. 1, the Lord can do his own work. Quote, he would like us to help. Very often he needs us to help, but I testify in this case and many others, the Lord can do his own work. He did his own work here. which that's a very fitting quote if we're looking at a future temple. Oh, by the way, I'll just remind everybody, the Independence LDS Visitor Center, this was built to be a temple. It's built according to the specifications revealed to Joseph Smith, not talking about these arches, but just the length and the width. And I've covered that before on the channel. If you don't believe me, go to past and future of temple lot by the Interpreter Foundation. I'm not going to read it here, but it talks about David O. McKay and Alvin R. Dyer right here at this part of this article. It takes a part out of his diary and how it says that they built this according to Joseph Smith's specifications and to be part of the 24 temple complex. Okay? So we have a temple in waiting right now. It's already built, just needs to be renovated. Maybe they'll get rid of these arches. The original plan calls for temples that look like the Kirtland temple. So you can see how they could you can do anything with renovation, but the basic structure is there. So if that's in place, let's go back to this and talk about the BYU Jerusalem Center. Okay, number 2, people were in the right place at the right time to bring about this large miracle. Quote, "It's not the glass or teak wood or stone I think most about when I come to the Jerusalem Center. It is the people then and now, there and here, who through their faith and good works made it happen. This is what I think about when I consider this special place." End quote. Number 3, in the work of the Lord, press forward with courage. Quote, "When you start something in the great cause of the kingdom, don't stop voluntarily. We were moving dirt in August 1984, but we were acting on sheer faith because we did not yet have a clear green light to do so. If we had not started in faith and persisted while we prayed, we would not be at that center today." Okay, and then number 4, this is the big one. The full potential of the BYU Jerusalem Center is still unrealized. Quote, "I don't know what it will mean a generation after we're gone or what future purposes the Lord will have for it, but I hope the students from all over the world will be blessed by it. My testimony to you is that the Lord wanted that center built and has it there for a great purpose that we now see only dimly." So that is a breadcrumb. May not be a temple, but it could serve some other great purpose. But if it does become a temple, and if this is the temple that needs to be there for when Christ comes, then yeah, that's kind of a big deal. That's huge. So it's a breadcrumb. So let's go to this latest breadcrumb. You can find it in this YouTube video on the KSL News website. Here's the transcription over here. It starts at the 1 minute and 57 second mark, but I'm going to read it from this spreadsheet. This is my quotes second coming spreadsheet, where I'm basically just collecting just quotes that have to do with the second coming and changes in the church, and just so you can easily go through them all and see just how much they're talking about the second coming. And so this is the latest thing. So I'm going to read it here just because it's easier. Okay, the temples, this is Jeffrey R. Holland. The temples, now this isn't, by the way, I have to correct just a little bit of the email. He wasn't referring to the Pioneer era temples. He's talking about all the temples throughout the world. He says here, the temples are being built for very large numbers of people. And that's how he said it. You see how I have very in italics? It's because he stressed that word. So let me read it again. The temples are being built for very large numbers of people to be having their temple experiences and making those covenants and changing the history of the world. So that is a very interesting thing. I don't know if he's referring to, and maybe he doesn't know. I don't know if he's referring to before the second coming or after, because we've talked about that influx of people that'll join immediately after the second coming. But it made me think about the number of temples. And I've actually had this thought before, but I didn't really put it to paper until this video about, look, with all these temples that we're building, like we've been able to make do with a certain number of temples up until this point, but now it's just exploding. And do we have enough people for all those temples? I'm going to show you the numbers, and it's going to blow you away. It blew me away, but I'm saving that for just a little bit later. Okay, so President Holland says very large numbers of people. Now, what's so interesting is, I think it was my last video that I made. I went over this post from President Nelson on his social media, November 1st, 2018. Okay, he says, I'll start right here and I'll zoom in. This is a global ministry. We are prophets for the whole world, to all of our God's children, not just the members of the church. So on this tour, we talk to people in 5 different countries. If there are 200 or more countries in this world, 5 is such a small drop in the bucket. We'll get around, but we'll still miss more than we'll touch, but we'll try. We won't give up just because it's a big job. Now, this is the key. We're just at the exponential phase of growth. Now, that blew me away. I didn't know he said this until I did my most recent video, going through his social media posts. And I got a lot of feedback, by the way, on that video. A lot of people wanted me to continue. So I guess I'm going to be doing a series of basically going year by year by year through his posts. And then if everybody still wants to, and if I'm feeling up to it, we'll move on. Why not do President Oaks? Why not do Elder Bednar? Like how many things have they said that I've missed and that you've missed? And this is one of them. He said, we're just at the exponential phase of growth. Now, if you don't know what that means, hopefully you learned about this in math, like in algebra back in, junior high school or high school or something. But if you haven't, this green line right here, this is exponential growth. Okay. It's basically like where you have a formula, and then you plot it on a graph. Okay. Here's like 3 different types of growth. Red is linear, where you take like 50 times whatever number you want, and then you just plot all the different possibilities, all the points, so linear growth, just like it sounds, it's just a line. It's just a constant line. It goes like that. Okay, that's one type of growth. You have cubic growth, where you pop in any number that you want for X, and then you times X by itself 3 times. So if you pick 10, it'd be 10 times 10 times 10, or 11 times 11 times 11. And you get this line right here, blue. Okay, and that's like even more, that's like a even faster growth than linear growth. But even quicker than that is exponential growth, where you take a number, say in this instance, they pick 2, and then you plug in any number that you want for the exponent. So, if you do 2, then it means times 2, so you do like 2 times 2. If it was 3, then it'd be 2 times 2 times 2. If it was 4, then it'd be 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, and so on. And when you do it this way, the growth skyrockets. Like it skyrockets really quickly into infinity, essentially. You see this right here? So it doesn't take very long before it just boom. And interestingly, when you look at this Wikipedia article called Membership History of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they have a graph here, and this looks like exponential growth. Now it starts to kind of taper off these last couple of years. It looks like, well, you can't really tell precisely. Maybe starting in 2017, it kind of like tapers off a little bit. And then, of course, there's the pandemic. But I would assume that this would just be a temporary thing, even if the second coming is a couple years away, which I don't think it is. But I would think that this would start to kind of like self-correct, and it would continue at an exponential rate. But I don't know. This is what the prophet, President Nelson, says. We're just at the exponential phase of growth, and it will continue. I'm continuing. He says, and it will continue. The Lord has said, I will hasten my work in its time, and he makes good on his promises. My dear friends, we are witnesses to the process of restoration. If you think the church is fully restored, you're just seeing the beginning. There's much more to come. Wait until next year, and then the next year. Eat your vitamins, get your rest. It's going to be exciting. So, and since 2018, when he said this, it certainly has been exciting with so many different things, but definitely with temples. Temples have skyrocketed. Now, let's go to the April 2022 General Conference, the women's session. There was a video that was played called You Are the Women He Foresaw. And this is another thing. This is another time where President Nelson is talking about growth. Okay, so we have President Holland, this most recent video that we just talked about, President Nelson's Facebook post about exponential growth. And now there's this. In 1979, President Spencer W. Kimball was in the hospital and asked his wife Camilla to read his talk to a general women's meeting. Sister Camilla Kimball, quote, much of the major growth that is coming to the church in the last days will come because many of the good women of the world, in whom there is often such an inner sense of spirituality, will be drawn to the church in large numbers. This will happen to the degree that the women of the church reflect righteousness and articulateness in their lives, and to the degree that the women of the church are seen as distinct and different in happy ways from the women of the world. President Russell M. Nelson, my dear sisters, you are our vital associates. My dear sisters, you are our vital associates during this winding up scene. The day that President Kimball foresaw is today. You are the women he foresaw. Your virtue, light, love, knowledge, courage, character, faith, and righteous lives will draw good women of the world, along with their families, into the church in unprecedented numbers. We need your strength, your conversion, your conviction, your ability to lead, your wisdom, and your voices. The kingdom of God is not and cannot be complete without women who make sacred covenants and keep them, women who can speak with the power and authority of God. Whatever your calling, whatever your circumstances, we need your impressions, your insights, and your inspiration. We need you to speak up and speak out in ward and stake councils. We need each married sister to speak as a contributing and full partner as you unite with your husband in governing your family. Married or single, you sisters possess distinctive capabilities and special intuition you have received as gifts from God. We brethren cannot duplicate your unique influence. We know that the culminating act of all creation was the creation of woman. We need your strength. I thank you, my dear sisters, and bless you to rise to your full stature, to fulfill the measure of your creation as we walk arm in arm in this sacred work. Together, we will help prepare the world for the second coming of the Lord. So growth. And let me just repeat, in large numbers, major growth, and in unprecedented numbers. So numbers that we haven't seen before. And I'm about to show you, when we look at the numbers, what I think the church has in mind. But just a couple more things I need to share before we get to that. Okay, so this is an Ensign article, April 2020, called The Future of the Church, Preparing the World for the Savior's Second Coming. And it's by President Nelson. Okay, sorry, let me find the spot. I have old... No, I don't. Okay. He says, today, the Lord's work in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is moving forward at an accelerated pace. The church will have an unprecedented, unparalleled future. And I think he's talking about growth, probably among other things as well. Eye hath not seen nor ear heard the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. Remember that the fullness of Christ's ministry lies in the future. The prophecies of his second coming have yet to be fulfilled. We are just building up to the climax of this last dispensation when the Savior's second coming becomes a reality. And then there's a warning later on. The time is coming when those who do not obey the Lord will be separated from those who do. Our safest assurance is to continue to be worthy of admission to his holy house. This could mean a few different things. Let me just do a little tangent. This could mean a few different things, not just necessarily one. One would be people that are separating themselves from the church because the world becomes more divided. Values in society are becoming more divided. It's harder to remain a member of the church, but also, do what you want in Babylon. And so a lot of people are choosing Babylon. So that could be one thing. Another thing is when the quickening, being caught up event takes place. There's going to be those that are prepared and those that aren't, those that are worthy to be caught up and meet Christ in the clouds or in the midst of the midst of the pillar of heaven along with the resurrected saints. So I'm guessing that, you wouldn't want to miss out on that. And if you want to participate in that event and everything that it entails, you probably want to make sure that you're worthy right now. And then, of course, there's the separation of those that are living a telestial lifestyle when they are destroyed at the coming of Christ, when the earth is cleansed by fire. So there's at least like three, kind of like separating things going on that I can think of. And so either way, I would take this seriously when he says that the time is coming that there's going to be a separation. I would take that seriously. Don't be one that's separated from the church. And then one more that I wanted to share. This is from October 2020 General Conference, President Henry B. Eyring in a talk called Sisters in Zion. And this is another amazing statement. He says, "You sisters, your daughters, your granddaughters, and the women you have nurtured will be at the heart of creating that society of people who will join in glorious association with the Savior. You will be an essential force in the gathering of Israel." So again, with the growth of the church. "And in the creation of a Zion people who will dwell in peace in the new Jerusalem." So this is really amazing. He talks about Enoch. This is the only time in General Conference, going back to 1942, that anyone quotes these verses about Enoch, about this thing here, they shall fall upon our necks and we will kiss each other, which again, I'm not planning on that. I'll shake hands, but I don't know about falling on their necks. But so you have like these really interesting statements that have to do with large, unparalleled, major growth of the church. And I think that you can see that represented in the number of temples that have been announced. You can see it here. I like this website, churchofjesuschristtemples.org, where look at all these temples right here. This is like starting right here. These are all the announced temples right now, going from number 240 to 335. So 95 temples. That is a lot. That's a lot. That's like a third. If you take it all together, if you take all temples together between those that are operational, under construction, and announced, it's roughly a third. I mean, it's less than a third, but it's about a third. About a third are simply in the announced stage. Okay, so when President Holland, let's remind ourselves what he said. When he says this, the temples are being built for very large numbers of people to be having their temple experiences and making those covenants and changing the history of the world. That's a hint of what the church leaders expect when it comes to growth. So now let's go to my spreadsheet that I put together. So what I did, and I need to, let me freeze this row up here so it follows us as we go down. So we have 4 columns: the year, the number of members of the church by the end of that year, the temples in operation by the end of that year, and then a ratio of how many members per temple. So in 1836, with the Kirtland Temple, there's 1 temple, and there were 13,293 members of the church. So you had 13,293 members per the 1 temple. You see how that goes? All right, so you go down through time, and my gosh, you get to 1883, and you still only have 1 temple. And before 1877, and by the way, this is the St. George Temple. Before 1877, there's big gaps of time where there is no temple. Just the Kirtland Temple for a very short time, and the Nauvoo Temple for like an even shorter time. So you get to the St. George Temple, years go by, then you have 2, years go by, then 3, and then a lot of years, and then 4, and then a lot of years go by, and then finally you have 5 in 1919, and then it just keeps going up. Okay, and you can see the number fluctuating over here, the ratio or the members per temple. Okay, so as we're looking at 4, for example, when we had 4 temples of the church, at first there were only 53,000 members of the church per temple. But as the church grew, suddenly it was 60, and then 63, and then 76, and then it got all the way up to 123. So you went from 53,000 to 123,000 per temple. And then a new temple is built, and then the ratio goes down because now you have 101,000 people per temple because of that temple. So you see how that goes. All right, so from this point, there's even more fluctuation as more people join the church and more temples are built. Okay, and you can see that there's like roughly, there's kind of like an average, for the most part. It kind of like, the average is usually somewhere in, well, I don't know, somewhere between the 120 to 130,000 range. It kind of spikes right here in 1954 at 162,000 people per temple. And then, gosh, look at the 60s. Now you get up into the 200s. It goes all the way up to 259,000 per temple. That's like bursting at the seams. And that's when there were only 17 temples. Okay. And then you suddenly have like a ton of temples that are built right here. You go from 20 to 40 in just a couple years. From 1982 to 1986, the number of temples are doubled. And you suddenly take care of this problem of 258 and you reduce it down to 154, which is, I'd imagine that's more manageable and normal based on what we've seen. But then the church continues to grow. The members per temple starts to climb back up to almost 200. And then we reach the year 1999 and 2000 with President Hinckley. And he announces all the temples. He's the one that broke the record at that time of number of temples announced. And so as this number approached 200, it was quickly brought back down by President Hinckley down to the low 100s. So it stays in the 100s. And then we come up to our own time, and it's actually really low right now. It's really, really low. As of 2022, only 97,000 per temple. And let's zoom out. You have to go back to 1930. You have to go all the way back to 1930 to have that low of a number. And before 1930, you have to go back to 1909. Yeah. So this is a really, really low number of members per temple, historically speaking. Because for the last while, again, look at the 70s where it was like in the 200s. And then after the 70s, it's in the, like 170s, 190s, so on. In more recent times, it's in the 100s. But now it's brought down to 97. Okay, so this is where we start doing some calculations, okay? Because I wanted to figure out, with all these temples announced, like these are only temples that are in operation. I'm not taking into account those that are announced, but I am in just a minute. So this is how it goes. Okay, so 2023. Okay. Well, actually, no, that's 2022. Okay, 2022. Membership is this 17 million divided by the 175 temples at that time that are in operation. And that equals 97,000 members per temple, right? So this is just simply the calculation of the last year. It's the calculation that I used for all these years. Now, if we take into account the number of temples that have been announced as of right now, 2023, and we keep this ratio the same, that would mean, so in other words, if the church expects future temples to have the same load, meaning 97,000 people per temple, if they're expecting that ratio to stay the same, then that must mean that with the temples that they have announced, like all temples plus those under construction and those that are announced, if you take all 335, then they must be expecting that the church is going to almost double to 32.5 million in order to keep this ratio, which is already really low by itself. So 32.5 million people, that's how many members of the church you would need to maintain this ratio. 97,000 people per temple. This is the number you would need. But on top of that, now I took into account, but the thing is, 97,000, like we just saw, is a very low number. For most of the 2000s, 2010s, it was actually more like in the 100s, so like 106, 105. And then before that, like we've seen before, it got up to the 200s and the 190s and 180s and stuff like that. So if you take an average throughout all church history and you use that number instead of the 97,000 per temple, let's bump it up to a higher number. So the average for all church history is 127 members per temple. So if you take the 335 that are currently announced in under construction, in operation, and you assume that the church wants to have an average, or they want to have 127,000 people per temple, then that would make the number that they expect even higher, 42.5, like 10 million people more than if this ratio held. So if that doesn't happen, and I think that it will, but let's just pretend. Let's say that there was let's say that it didn't happen. That would mean that this number that we're currently at, 97,000 people per temple, if we don't have this growth, then this number is going to be really low. It's going to be really, really low. I don't know what it would be. Let's see. How do I got this? Okay, so let's do it like this. I didn't think to do this until just now. Let's bring this down to let's just put it like right here. We'll do small growth. So let's say in 10 years, so let's say 2033, let's say that the church is only at, like, say, let's say we go from, okay, so the rate is about 1 million new people every 3 years or so. Yeah, let's say about 1 million people every 3 years. So that would be, let's say 4 million. Between now and 2023, let's say that we only gain 4 million people if we stay at the current rate of growth. Okay, so that would bring us to 21 million people, right? 21 million. There we go. So if that happens, if we don't have large growth, and we only stay at, or if we only end up at 21 million in 2033, then that would mean that the number of members per temple would be 62,000. Let's go back through time and see the last time we had 62,000. 1896, when there was only 4 temples and only 241,000 members of the church. So clearly, when you think about the number of temples that have been announced and are under construction, President Nelson and the church and whoever aids them in, thinking about projections and growth, clearly they think that the church is going to grow significantly. And I don't think by any means they think that we're only going to be at 21 million in 2033. So instead of linear growth, kind of like what we've seen for the last while, where it's just like I said, about 1 million is added every 3 years. Instead of that kind of growth, just like President Nelson said, it seems like he literally means he's expecting exponential growth. And it's going to be more something like at some undesignated point in the future, it's going to be somewhere between 32 million to 42 million. That is pretty astounding. And it could go even higher. And what happens at the second coming? When instead of 42 million, you have 1 or 2 billion people. Holy cow. So, if President Nelson expects the second coming to happen during his lifetime or during President Oak's time, or, just in the next 5 to 10 years, then that is quite the challenge to be ready for that. And you would have to continue. It's almost like, from a worldly standpoint, if you were like advising the church, you'd be like, well, okay, you want to try and build as much as you can before it happens without breaking the bank and having the new temples be viable. Does it make sense? So it's like, okay, second coming's really soon. How many temples do we build? And are we going to overextend ourselves? Like, if we end up building all these temples within like a few years, and the second coming is not yet, then there's, are we only going to have, 50,000 or 20,000 people per temple or something like that? So you understand what I mean? If it was a worldly thing, it'd be like really risky, maybe. But since President Nelson is a prophet, I'm sure he has it on very good authority that it's a wise idea to build all these temples, because like these kind of numbers are what we're going to have. And if there is exponential growth, if it's like really, really big, if it's beyond what we see here, maybe we're going to be overwhelmed for a while with temples, and we're going to see something like what we saw in the 70s and 60s. Well, yeah, like the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, where it's like 200,000 people per temple, or maybe it'll be like 500,000 people per temple. Maybe it'll be like 1 million people per temple. I have no idea. But I would imagine that at the very beginning of the millennium, things are going to be a little bit tight, and you really will have the kind of situation where the temples are operating day and night, literally 24/7, because of so many people, and because the church was only able to build so many temples before it happened. And then once you do have all these converts, then in the process of time, with more resources available, you can quickly build more temples. But for the first few years, probably it'll probably be very extreme, very, very extreme, until those additional temples can be built to accommodate 1 or 2 or 3 billion people, however much it ends up being. And this is one reason why I can't picture when the world is burned. We don't really understand exactly how the infrastructure of this world is going to be affected. We know that there's going to be a great earthquake. The continents are going to come together. There's going to be a burning. We don't know exactly what that entails, but we do know that the elements are going to melt, and I don't know if that means that the entire earth is going to suddenly become molten lava and then it has to cool down. And then I don't think so, because Brigham Young and others have said that the Salt Lake Temple was built to last through the millennium. And I think that that's the idea. I think there are going to be great destructions. There is going to be melting of elements. I don't know that it's going to be worldwide in every single spot, but just like major, things that happen. But I'm thinking that all these temples are meant to last through the millennium, all of them. And so I feel like just the fact that they're building so many temples, they're not building them just so that they'll be destroyed and we'll have to start back at zero at the beginning of the millennium. I don't think that really makes sense. So anyway, there you go. I don't know about you, but I feel like this is pretty shocking that they're thinking somewhere within this range of membership, 32 to 42 million people, because I do not think that they are planning on just 21 million with 62,000 members per temple. I don't think that. But okay, well, I guess that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.